On the morning of April 6, 1933, millions of Americans woke up as criminals. Not because they had stolen something, but because they owned gold. Yesterday, it was their legal right. Today, it was a federal crime punishable by 10 years in prison. Overnight, President Roosevelt transformed gold from a symbol of wealth into an instrument of crime. And so began the most massive robbery in human history, a robbery that the government committed against its own people. Today, we'll tell you how in 30 days Americans voluntarily surrendered 3,600 tons of pure gold to the government, and why none of them suspected that they were simply being deceived. Picture 1933. America is experiencing the most terrible economic crisis in its history. The Great Depression has turned a prosperous nation into a country of the unemployed and destitute. Every day, banks are closing. People are losing their savings. Some are losing their homes, and some no longer have the ability to feed their children. Fear and panic reign in society. In such times, people seek security. And for Americans in 1933, security had the color of gold. Gold coins, gold bars, gold certificates. This was the only thing that could be trusted when everything else was collapsing. But the new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, looked at this gold with completely different eyes. For him, every ounce in private hands was an obstacle on the path to saving the economy. He devised a plan whereby saving America required taking all private and corporate gold from citizens. To understand the scale of what happened, we need to return to the origins of the American financial system. Since 1879, the USA had lived under the gold standard. Every dollar was tied to a specific amount of gold. This meant the government couldn't simply print money out of thin air. Every banknote had to be backed by real gold in the Treasury. The system worked for decades. Americans got used to the fact that their money wasn't just paper, but real value. But in 1929, everything changed. The stock market crash triggered a chain reaction. When banks began collapsing, one after another, gripped by panic, rushed to withdraw their deposits. But they demanded not paper money, but gold. Real, tangible gold. By 1933, the situation had become critical. The Federal Reserve's gold reserves were rapidly melting away. If this continued, the gold standard would collapse, and with it the entire American economy. Roosevelt understood to save the country was necessary to break the link between the dollar and gold. But doing this required doing the impossible, taking gold away from an entire nation. April 5, 1933. Roosevelt has been in the White House for only a month. The economic crisis has reached its peak. After another cigarette, the president finally signs a document that will go down in history as one of the most controversial orders. Executive Order Number 6102. Official title: Forbidding the Hoarding of Gold Coin within the continental United States. But the essence was much simpler and harsher. All Americans were required, within the next 25 days, to surrender all their gold to the government. Absolutely all of it. The exceptions were ridiculously small. Jewelry, dental crowns, and small amounts for industrial needs. Everything else was subject to immediate confiscation. The price was fixed at $20.67 per ounce. No bargaining, no negotiations, no consideration of market value. The government simply announced, "We're buying your gold at this price, and you have no choice." And now the most interesting part: the punishment for disobedience. a fine of $10,000 or imprisonment for up to 10 years. Or both, simultaneously. To help you understand the scale of this fine in 1933, the average American salary was about $1,600 per year. A $10,000 fine was equivalent to 6 years of work, and 10 years in prison was more than many murderers received. "What are you in for?" "I kept a coin my grandpa gave me." Silence, reaction. "You sick monster!" Roosevelt understood threats alone weren't enough. It was necessary to convince Americans that surrendering gold was their patriotic duty, that it was for the common good. A powerful propaganda campaign began. Newspapers across the country published articles saying that hoarding gold was a selfish act that harmed economic recovery. Radio stations broadcast appeals explaining that surrendering gold would help create new jobs. Banks turned into agitation centers. Posters hung on their walls with slogans like, "Surrender gold, save America," and "Your patriotic duty is to help the country." The impression was created that those who didn't surrender gold automatically became enemies of the people, and traders willing to sacrifice the entire country for their own benefit. And this propaganda worked. Most Americans truly believed that they were giving up gold for the good of the nation. They didn't understand that they were participating in the most cynical robbery in human history. By May 1st, 1933, the deadline for surrendering gold lines at banks stretched for blocks. People carried their family savings. Gold coins inherited from grandfathers and great-grandfathers. Their last savings that could ensure them a comfortable old age. Instead of gold, they received paper bills that were rapidly losing their value. The results exceeded the government's boldest expectations. In 1 month, Americans voluntarily surrendered 2,976,000 ounces. This was approximately $118 million at the time. But converted to modern money, this is about $10 billion. But this was only the gold of private individuals. To this must be added the gold of corporations, banks. In total, the government seized about 3,673 tons of gold. And here lies the most tragic irony. Between 1848 and 1860, brave prospectors panned more than 750,000 pounds of precious metal. This gold was turned into coins that were carefully preserved in American families. And now the government demanded that all this heritage be surrendered. But now comes the most cynical part of the story. Remember, the government was buying gold at $20.67 per ounce. On January 30th, 1934, less than a year after the confiscation, Roosevelt signs the Gold Reserve Act. And overnight, the price of gold is set at a new level, $35 per ounce. Simple arithmetic. The government bought gold for $20.67, and a few months later it was worth $35. Profit, almost 70%. On the confiscated gold of American citizens, the government made about $2.8 billion. For those times, this was astronomical money. For comparison, the entire U.S. federal budget in 1934 was $6 billion. This means that almost half of all American government expenditures were financed by robbing its own citizens. Americans who honestly surrendered their gold watched as their former savings brought the government incredible profits, while they remained with rapidly depreciating paper bills. Of course, not all Americans meekly agreed to the robbery. Some tried to resist. The most famous case is that of Frederick Barber Campbell, a successful businessman who owned gold bars worth more than $200,000. and categorically refused to surrender them. Campbell hired the best lawyers and filed a lawsuit against the government. He argued that the confiscation violated the Fifth Amendment, which protects citizens from seizure of private property. The case reached the Supreme Court, and there occurred what finally buried Americans' hopes for justice. In 1935, the Supreme Court ruled that Congress has the right to regulate the value of money. In simple terms, the Supreme Court legalized the robbery. Campbell lost. It affected him so deeply that during one of the hearings he suffered a heart attack. But what was even worse, he became an example for everyone else. The government made it clear, resistance is futile. Some Americans tried to hide their gold. But even here, unpleasant surprises awaited them. The FBI began active investigations. Banks were required to report suspicious transactions. Informing became everyday practice. "Hello? My neighbor's turkey looks heavy." In the 3 years after the order, several thousand criminal cases were initiated. Most ended with prison sentences or ruinous fines. Now the U.S. government had a huge amount of gold, and it needed to decide where to store it. Thus was born the idea of creating the most protected storage facility in the world. Fort Knox, in Kentucky. Construction began in 1936. It cost $560,000, but no expense was spared for storing the stolen gold. The vault was built like a real fortress. Walls more than a meter thick made of reinforced concrete and steel, an entrance door weighing 20 tons, a lock system so complex that no one person knows the complete combination. The code is divided among several people. Round-the-clock security. Minefields around the storage facility. Video surveillance systems that were revolutionary for the 1930s. Even today, Fort Knox remains one of the most protected objects in the world. By 1941, more than 650 million ounces of gold were stored here. More than half of all U.S. gold reserves. This was gold that had belonged to ordinary American families just a few years earlier. Moving the gold was a secret operation. Armored trains, machine guns, and enough nerves to snap a suspension bridge. But now, it was safe. Or so they said. The heist was complete. But did this help save the American economy? There is no definitive answer to this question. Most modern economists believe that Roosevelt's policy indeed accelerated recovery. By breaking the gold shackles, the government could print money to create jobs. Deflation stopped. Prices stabilized. America began to breathe again. But at the same time, this policy was completely immoral. It violated promises made to the American people. Your money is safe until we need it. And it set a dangerous precedent. Money became fiat, backed by nothing but trust. And trust is a fragile thing. But the story of gold didn't end in 1933. Another robbery was coming. Fast forward to 1971. America was spending money like a drunken sailor. Vietnam War, social programs, the printers were overheating. Other countries started getting suspicious. Do you guys actually have enough gold for all this paper? They started demanding to exchange their dollars for gold. August 15th, 1971. The Nixon shock. He temporarily suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Spoiler alert. Temporary meant forever. With one signature, the final link was cut. The dollar became a fiat currency, backed by nothing but the government's promise. And we all know how much that is worth. Inflation skyrocketed. The era of sound money was officially over. Today, U.S. gold is still stored in Fort Knox. Officially, there are 8,133 tons there, but nobody knows for sure. The last public audit was conducted in 1974. And even then, they only opened a few rooms. Conspiracy theories are wild. Some say the vault is empty. Some say the gold was sold to keep the price down. Others claim it's just gold-plated tungsten. In 2017, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin visited. He tweeted, "Gold is safe. Trust me, bro." Perhaps the government continues to deceive us, or perhaps the gold is all there, just waiting for the next crisis, because history is a circle. What happened once can happen again. But that's a completely different story. Brief pause for effect. The 1933 gold confiscation taught us a brutal lesson. You don't truly own anything. Not your house, not your savings, and definitely not your gold. If the government panics rules are just suggestions, they robbed their own citizens to save the system. And they got away with it. Today, we live in a world of fiat money. Printing trillions is just a button press away. But gold remembers. It survived Roosevelt. It survived Nixon. And it will probably survive whatever comes next. If you don't want to be robbed of your knowledge, make sure to subscribe, or Uncle Sam might come for your likes next. Thanks for watching.